Hello and welcome to this video on special orders. Managers will often have to make decisions based on customer requests. Sometimes a customer may ask for a price discount if they're going to order a higher than normal quantity of your product. So a special order is going to be a short-run pricing decision, and it's going to be on a case-by-case basis when a customer places an order that is very different than those placed in the regular course of business. So to analyze if you should actually accept or decline these offers, what we need to do is we need to think about the contribution margin of this special order, any capacity constraints your business may face, and any qualitative considerations that may also come into play. So let's look at an example here. Qantas have been asked to provide 150 seats for executives from BHP Billiton to attend a conference in Melbourne. BHP have contacted Qantas and said, "We would like to buy 150 seats and we're willing to pay $125 per ticket." If you went on the Qantas website and looked at the ticket prices, it would normally be $275 per ticket. So BHP are expecting a really large discount because they're buying in bulk and going to buy 150 seats at once. And there's a few considerations such as the travel must occur on a particular morning. There's already 5 flights flying to Melbourne during that time. We've got each flight having a capacity of 180 passengers, and Qantas normally sell about 140 of those tickets. So if we looked at our traditional accounting information here, we would see that we've got the different costs that Qantas have to face: the meals and drinks, fuel, the cost of cabin crew, flight crew, the depreciation of the aircraft and aircraft maintenance. And we could see that as we add up the cost per trip and divide through by the average number of passengers, we get a total cost of about $137.61 per passenger. This would be if we're looking at the full costing. However, we've recently learnt that contribution margins are really important, and it's also important to consider relevant costs only. So as we look through these different costs, some of these costs like meals and drinks are variable, and they're going to differ depending on if we accept these extra 150 passengers. But things like the aircraft maintenance and depreciation of the aircraft will not change regardless of if we accept the extra 150 passengers. So they're going to be considered irrelevant costs because they're fixed regardless of what happens. So if we look at the full cost, we see that the cost per passenger is more than the $125 that Qantas have been offered. However, as we consider the relevance of the costs and the cost behavior, we see that only the meals and drinks per passenger are relevant because they're the costs that are going to change between the two alternatives we're considering. So the $6.50 cost per passenger is relevant, whereas the fuel, the cabin crew, flight crew, depreciation, and aircraft maintenance are going to be relatively fixed costs, and they are irrelevant between these, so we can ignore those costs. So let's calculate the contribution margin. The sales revenue would be $125 per ticket, and the variable costs would be $6.50, so we would have a positive contribution margin of $118.50. So that's going to indicate that this is probably a good decision to accept the order based purely on the financial considerations here if we have spare capacity. However, what happens if the planes are at full capacity? If Qantas would normally sell out the planes, that means they're operating at full capacity, then now all of these costs would be irrelevant because the total costs, even the variable costs here, would be the same under the two alternatives because we'd have the same number of passengers on our planes. So the only relevant thing if our planes were operating at full capacity would be the difference in revenue. And obviously, if we're already selling out at the full price tickets, we would continue selling the full price tickets and we would decline the offer of the reduced $125 tickets. So what we need to do is we need to look at the contribution margin for the deal, and we also need to take into account the capacity constraints. If we have spare capacity and there's a positive contribution margin, the financial decision will be, let's accept the special order because it will increase our profit. However, if we do not have spare capacity and we're operating at full capacity, in that situation, all of these costs would be irrelevant, and the only thing that we need to take into account is the difference in sales revenue. We also need to consider that sometimes fixed costs may become relevant. That is, if the relevant range changes between the two alternatives, the fixed costs may also change as well. So continuing with our Qantas example, If Qantas had a policy that they had to have one cabin crew for every 35 passengers, under an average load, they would require 4 cabin crew. However, if they accepted this special order, the number of passengers on board would increase, and therefore they would have to hire an extra cabin crew. So if a cabin crew member gets paid $275 per flight, then we would have to allocate that new fixed cost across the passengers. It would now be a fixed cost that is relevant because it changes between the two alternatives. So now we'd have to take into account our variable costs of food and drink, plus the change in cabin crew costs to give us a new cost per additional passenger between these two alternatives. So we've just briefly looked at how to analyze the financial decision for special orders. However, you must consider qualitative factors as well. Even if our contribution margin's positive and we do have capacity, it doesn't mean it's a definite yes, we should accept the order. We need to consider all the other business factors, such as if word gets out that we're selling these discount prices, will all our corporate customers demand such big discounts? If it's a negative contribution margin, but just a slight one, if we decline the offer, will we lose a long-term customer that is otherwise valuable? Is it worth taking a small loss on this deal if we're going to create a positive relationship with this customer in the future that will be profitable? And what happens if we made prediction errors that were wrong and our capacity forecasts were incorrect? How would that play out if we have to turn away full fee paying customers? How much of a problem would that be for our business? So when analyzing special orders, we need to think about what's the contribution margin of the special order? Do we have the capacity to actually undertake this project? And then we also need to consider all the qualitative factors as well that may supersede the financials in the decision making. Thank you.